and I'm going to invite our speaker, Jim Wallace, to come on up. And I said, what bio do you want me to give? What things do you want me to tell about you to impress you guys? And he said, nothing. Don't say anything. So I have no transition to welcome you this morning. Would you guys welcome Jim Wallace?
That's a good thing. I would never have been, if you had invited me to come to a church setting like this as a non-believer, I was a really committed atheist until I was about 35, and there was no way. My wife tried for about 3 years to get me to come to church because she was interested, although we had been together like 18 years. She wasn't a Christian either, but I think she was more interested than I was. I would never have said yes. So if you're here visiting because somebody sitting next to you has forced you to come, good for you, right? That's pretty awesome, I think. My name is Jim Wallace. I work in Los Angeles County. Was there for a number of years working cold case homicides. Those are just the unsolved murders. Okay, and there's no statute of limitations on a murder. So if you have a case like this that occurred 30 years ago and no one solved it, this thing stays open. And so I get to work these cases, and most of my cases have been on Dateline. I think I've been on Dateline more than anybody else. Just working these unsolved murders. They're unusual, right? And a lot of the reason why I became a Christian ultimately is because I started to apply my thinking on eyewitnesses and how do you work cases to the case for Jesus. Because I didn't know any other way, right? This is just the way that I approached everything. So this is how I ended up. Now, my son is now, he was about maybe 6 when I became a Christian, 6 or 7. So he was raised as a Christian. And he works at our agency. He wears the same uniform I wore for years. His name is Jim Wallace because we're not creative people. I just gave him the same name. And he's wearing I gave him my old shirts when I left because I did that job for a number of years before him at the same agency. That was my business card. And I followed in my dad's footsteps because he was there before me. His name is also Jim Wallace. And so we've been at this agency for 60 years. If you call that agency, Jimmy still gets emails from people who are looking for, not me, they're looking for my dad, like my dad's going to be there for 60 years, right? Although I met Jeff here the other day. You might be at your agency pretty close to that time, it sounds like. So, but we've just been at this agency trying to figure out like a lot of our cases are cases my dad started that then I touched. And now we've got one that now Jimmy is working that I wasn't able to solve. So these are like multi-generational cases. So they're old. Now, a couple of years ago, I was asked to do a short scene in this movie called God's Not Dead 2. And I was given 6 minutes to make a case for Christianity. That is really hard to do. If you're in this room right now and you're a believer, if somebody asked you to defend what you believe and they only gave you 6 minutes, I'm kind of wondering what you would say. I'm going to give you a 30-minute quick overview of how I became a Christian because I had to hop over a hurdle that I really thought was unhoppable because I was a very committed philosophical naturalist. In other words, I didn't believe in anything supernatural, anything non-physical. You have a brain, but I would have rejected the idea of an immaterial mind. I would have said, yeah, you have a body, but I would have rejected the idea of an immaterial soul. I believed in other human beings, physical beings, but I did not believe in angels and demons and God. These are immaterial. They don't make sense under a naturalistic worldview. And that's really where I was committed. So I knew there was a one piece of evidence in the Christian worldview that was going to make all the difference. If this thing was true, Christianity was true. If this thing was false, Christianity was false. So I'm going to walk you through my investigation. You can see how I did it, okay? Now, in our agency, if you die and it's suspicious, they will dispatch police officers to look at your death scene. And we had one woman in our city who was a pretty committed drug addict. And she passed away one day, and her roommates called us and said, hey, she's dead in this bed. And the officers get there, and this was her nightstand. Okay, it's a pretty unusual nightstand, right? I bet you your nightstands don't look like this. I hope. This is a close-up. She was a heroin addict, so she's got her heroin needles here. If I can get my clicker to work, it should. There it is. So that's one of her heroin needles. This is another one here, another one here. But she would also smoke rock cocaine to kind of balance her so she could be functional during the day. So these are all her rock pipes on the same nightstand. You put those two things together for a long enough period of time, bad things are going to happen, right? So when our officers got to this death scene, what do you think they surmised? What would you surmise if you found this at her death scene? Overdose. So they call the coroner. In Los Angeles County, people die every day. It takes a while for a coroner's investigator to get there. So they're standing around in a room just talking to each other, waiting for the coroner to get there. And the coroner investigator finally gets there and comes in the room and pulls down the blankets, and she's been stabbed to death. And they didn't even bother to pull the blankets down. Well, why? Because they thought they knew the answer to the question before they started to investigate it. If you think you know the answer to any investigation before you even begin, there's a good chance you're going to end up in the wrong spot. That's why we try to take whatever presuppositions you have, shelve them. We're trying to get to what is the most reasonable inference from evidence. That is the standard. The standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not beyond a possible doubt. I have never gotten beyond a possible doubt. We ask jurors, are you the kind of person who has to remove every possible doubt before you can render a verdict? Yeah, I think I am. Then you're excused. The standard is not beyond a possible doubt. You never convict anybody. The standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a lower standard. Are we clear? So the question is, how do I get to this reasonable standard? What exactly would determine if something is reasonable? That's what I'm going to teach you this morning. So let's do a little death scene investigation together. Are you ready for something gruesome? This is, by the way, my Easter talk. If you had me come out to speak for Easter Sunday, this is the talk I would give you, okay? I did this once time at an Italian Pentecostal church in Toronto. Did you even know there were Italian Pentecostal church? I didn't know. On Easter Sunday, the room was full of kids. They don't have a children's services on Easter Sunday. I'm like, oh, that was bad. I should have asked that question before I did this presentation. So we're going to look at a dead guy. He looks suspiciously like my son Jimmy. Back when he used to work at Trader. Do you guys have Trader Joe's? You do? You don't? No? You guys don't even know what Trader Joe's is? Oh, you do? Okay, yes. Well, you need to get a Trader Joe's in town, okay? This is a great store. Now, the question when you're in a death scene, though, is how did he die? Is this a murder scene? Not every death scene is a murder scene. How do we determine if this is a... So I'm going to apologize to you right now. I have young kids in the room. Just cover their eyes for a few seconds, okay? No one had to die to make this presentation. Okay, so this is all relax. The wonders of Photoshop, okay? So the question is, how do I know what kind of death that is? Well, here's how we determine that. We make two lists that begin with an E. A list of evidence, a list of explanations. We're trying to figure out which explanation best describes the evidence. Does that make sense? That's what we're trying to do. So here, what do I have so far? Well, here's my evidence on one side. I'll put my explanations on the other. Well, so far, all I got is a dead guy who's laying face down. How do I explain dead guys who are laying face down? Well, there's four ways to explain them. He could have died by some natural cause, right? He could have died by some accident. Or he could have committed suicide. Or he could have been murdered. That's the fourth option. How do I determine? So right now, with all you have, evidence in the room, you have a dead guy laying face down. Can I cross out any of these explanations as unreasonable right now? What can I cross out? Just shout it out. What? Okay, so if he had a heart attack, he would kind of look like, that's a natural death, he would look like that, right? As a matter of fact, if he accidentally took too many pills, he would look like that. If he intentionally took too many pills, he would look like that. If I poisoned him with too many pills, he would look like that. Do you see how right now I cannot cross out anything? All of these are equally reasonable. They're all still in play. Let's change our scenario. What if he's a dead guy laying in a pool of his own blood, center torso? That would change things, don't you think? So now I can go back and add that to my evidence list. I now have a pool of blood. Okay. What can I cross out? Yeah, I mean, is it possible? I'm not after possible. I'm after reasonable. So if you ask me, is it possible, I will always say yes, even though it may not be reasonable. Because the standard is not possible, the standard is reasonable. So where can I bleed from? What opening is here for me to bleed from? It's possible, I suppose. But it's not reasonable, so now I can cross that first one out. Can I cross out anything else? Not really, until I roll them over and see what this is, right? Okay, by the way, can you imagine you get to church today so you can see this? Is this great or what? Only in America can you do this. All right, so let's change our scenario slightly. Now he's a dead guy laying in a pool of his own blood, center torso, and he's got a big honking knife sticking out of his back. Does that change things? I think it does. Let's add that to our list. What can I cross out? Yeah, I think, okay, so I could reach that myself, but it's kind of hard to accidentally back up into that blade in a vertical position. I think I can at least cross out accidental with confidence. But I don't know about the suicide part. I'm just going to leave it in for the sake of argument. But what if instead of having a single knife wound in his back, he actually had multiple stab wounds in his back? Would that change things? In his upper back? I think it would. Unless you're incredibly flexible and have a great tolerance for pain, this is no longer reason. Is it possible? Yeah. Anything's possible. It's possible we're not even here right now. It's possible you're still sleeping right now. This whole thing it's possible that we're in a simulated universe. There are philosophers who think that's the case. The question is that reasonable? No. But let's just add to this, okay? I think this is pretty good where we are right now. But what if in addition to all of this, we also had bloody footprints leading out of the room? It's really hard to stab yourself multiple times in the upper back and then walk out of the room in your own blood. That's hard. That's why this is the best inference from evidence now. So you see, and by the way, Jimmy's still alive, okay? He went to UCLA, I went to UCLA, so we're both Bruins. My son David is a doctor, he went to USC, he's a communist, okay, just so you know. That's the difference between those two. So my point is, this is a process that I wrote about it in a book called Cold Case Christianity. I drew it. I get to draw my own drawing. So this is my drawing from the book. And this is basically a process that we call abductive reasoning. I just taught you a logical process that you, by the way, use all the time. When your kids come home late and they give you some lame excuse as to why they're late, I had a buddy who was a detective with me. He would always wait up for his son and he would give him a big hug and a kiss when he would go to bed. And I'm like, Dave, I don't see you as a hugging and kissing kind of guy. He says, no, I don't want to smell if you're smoking dope or drinking. I got to get close enough to smell that. What's he doing? He's collecting evidence so he can evaluate what lame excuse his son is going to give. To see, we do this all the time. Jurors do this all the time. So as a guy who was 35 years old and was not interested in Christianity, I knew there was one claim that had to be true in order for Christianity to be true, or it's false. And that was the resurrection. If the resurrection occurred, and listen, I could use the same process of abductive reasoning to examine the resurrection. And I knew, according to Paul, this was the most important piece of evidence in the room. Paul says, if this isn't true, you're to be pitied. I have lied to you. We are false witnesses. We have lied to you about the very thing that we're going to use to change the world in the book of Acts, our testimony to the risen Jesus. So I knew. I just had to examine this one thing. Evidence and explanations. But what is it going to count as evidence? Well, I was not a believer. So I would give you very few things here in this side. I would have said this: I believe that Jesus existed. I'm not a Jesus myther, okay? If you have a question about that, just text it to us. I'll tell you why I'm not a Jesus myther, but I believed he lived. That is the most reasonable inference from evidence. And that, okay, I would even say, okay, he died. This stuff does not make Christianity true. Though that could be true, that Jesus lived, was crucified, and was buried, yet Christianity could still be false. Now, apparently there's an empty tomb. Well, yeah, I think there was an empty tomb. Here's why. This whole thing is over in the first century if you do one of two things. Get the body of Jesus and drag it around town. It's game over. Or get the initial alleged eyewitnesses to recant. It'll be game over. Apparently they couldn't get that to happen. Does not mean it's true, though. I can explain the empty tomb a number of different ways. And yes, they made a claim about having seen him. People make all kinds of claims that are false. This first three things could be true, yet Christianity is still false. I'll give you one more. They seem to be committed to their claims. So what? People are committed to all kinds of things that aren't true. All these things could be true, yet Christianity was still false, and that was all I was going to give you anyway. Those are the only four things I would have given you as an atheist. But how do you explain those four things? I need to have a list of explanations. I had 6 that are typically the explanations that I would have given you as an atheist. There's a 7th explanation. It's your explanation as a Christian. All I had to do is figure out which of these I could cross off. Same thing we just did at the death scene, I was going to do at the resurrection. Now, we can't do all of this today. We're going to do parts of it. But I'm going to send you the video of the entire talk, okay? I am not here today to sell you anything. We have books. I'll be happy to sign a book. Just bring it to me. I'll sign it. I want to help that ministry. I didn't send those books because I just felt like, as an atheist, that used to always bug me. You Christians are always selling something. And now here I am years later as an author. So I hate the whole book sale thing, I'll just tell you. So I'm going to send you videos. I'm going to send you PDF files. I'm going to send you Bible inserts of what I'm showing you today. I'm going to send all that to you. You don't need to buy that book. If you want to buy it to dive deeper, no problem. I'll be happy to sign it, but I'm not here to sell it to you. I want to show you a couple of things I started to examine, though, so you can kind of see it. The first is this one. Maybe they were just wrong. They're just wrong because he's not dead. He might look dead, but if he's just unconscious, then this would explain why you thought he came back to life. He just was resuscitated. He wasn't resurrected. And there's good reason to believe this from your scripture. It says that he was executed along with 2 other people. Those 2 other people, when they came to collect the bodies, they weren't dead. Oh, so your guy's dead. Well, the other 2 weren't dead. They had to break their legs to make sure they were dead. Oh, they broke your guy's legs, right? No, they didn't. So how do you know your guy's dead? If they would have broken your guy's legs, then you would have known he was dead. But they didn't do that. They just stabbed the guy. Okay, really? So he's not dead. And clearly 2 of the 3 are not dead. I would have said this is the problem. But what's interesting is that last line right there, that blood and water line is so weird, right? No, I'm away from my, come on, baby. There it is. This line right here, this little blood and water line. That's that weird, right? Like, why would you stab somebody with a spear and bring a sudden flow of the separation of blood? So you'd actually, not bloody, watery blood or bloody water, but a separation of blood and water. That's weird. As a matter of fact, it's so weird that the first readers of this gospel denied that that was really water. The earliest church fathers who write on John chapter 19 will say, it can't be water. That makes no sense. It's got to be a symbol of something else. It's got to be a symbol of baptism or the Holy Spirit, of something, right? Because there's no way water is going to... Nobody understood this. So why would John include something that nobody would understand? Well, maybe he just saw it. But what is he seeing? How many of you here have actually had to handle dead bodies? Raise your hand. There's always a bunch of people who have. Great. You're either in the medical professions or you're in law enforcement, first responders. I get all that. The earliest church fathers did not understand what this was because they were behind the curve on science. This is a hidden piece of science in the New Testament. You all know that if you are injured, like if I get to a car accident and someone's going to die right in front of me, or I get to an assault and someone's going to die in front of me, they're going to go through steps. It's usually going to start with some form of circulatory shock where you start to shut down, your body is shutting down to conserve energy for certain vital organs. And in the end, I'm now going to have that stupid hand in my slide, so I'll just get rid of that. Thank you very much. In the end, you'll start to see this happen, and eventually, if your heart fails altogether and you go into cardiac arrest, you are going to suffer one of 2 forms of effusion. And that's where water is going to collect in your body. If it's around your heart, this is called pericardial effusion, but I've been to autopsies. I go to a lot of autopsies, unfortunately, and it doesn't look quite like that. It's not as much water as that depicts. But if you are in the right position, water can collect in your lungs. That's called pleural effusion. And if you stab that chest cavity in the lung area, you will draw water that you will see as separate from the blood. But this means I've already suffered the circulatory shock and the cardiac arrest that led to pleural effusion. This hidden piece of science that says there's a separation of blood and water actually indicates that he's already gone through that process. Nobody understood that piece of science. But he must have seen it. And not even understanding himself as a fisherman, he wrote it in. And now we can look at it. But by the way, for those of you who have handled dead bodies, I have never once mistaken a dead body for an unconscious person. Have you? I'm even across the room. I'm like, dude's dead. I don't need to go over there and touch him to know he's dead. If you don't know this, if you're used to seeing death on TV as an unconscious actor, or an actor who's laying still, you might not recognize what's called the mortis triad, the triad that demonstrates death. So I want to educate you guys. Let's go down to the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. This is on North Mission Road in Los Angeles, next to the Big G Hospital, where General Hospital was originally set. And it's a beautiful old building, and it used to be you could walk up here, and you could walk up, I'm not going to get this to work today for some reason, through those doors. There you go. Now I got it. Through this door here, and you could walk up and you go through this window. Behind this window was the Los Angeles County Coroner's gift shop. Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. It's not there anymore. It used to be called Skeletons in the Closet. And you could buy T-shirts like this one, "Our bodies of work speak for themselves." Or you could buy this mouse pad that says, "You're dying for your business," right? It was great. But next door in the white building is where they have the examination rooms. And I wish they looked like this. They don't. Because we're doing so many bodies every day that they're constantly being turned over. And they are a bloody, that's why you have, when I first started this in 1988, those tables were wood. Yeah, why is that a problem? Well, because you're constantly washing all the blood off these metal tables into those grates. And now just the head prop is a wooden prop, but other than that, it's all metal, right? And there used to be a sign on the wall that said, "No eating in the examination room." Like, people are going to pull out a sandwich while you're doing an autopsy, right? But people do it. Well, you notice something in these rooms that is inconvenient but true once your heart stops beating and it's no longer pushing warm blood. And this is obvious to those of us who deal with death regularly. Do you realize in the first century, you couldn't call a mortuary? There was no coroner to call. You handled your own dead. While you might not know what the mortis triad is, there's no way you can convince me that people in the first century would not have known the mortis triad. You want me to believe that these folks missed this? They're handling the dead body of Jesus and they didn't notice these three things that every dead body possesses? That's hard for me to accept. The first thing that happens is you start to cool down, right? You start to lose your temperature. That is called algor mortis. People who are dead are also less elastic. Have you noticed that? Like, as I get older, I hate the fact that I can pinch the back of my hand and it takes a few seconds for it to go down. I hate that. Well, dead people, you could do that, and it's almost like your body starts to change once hot blood stops circulating. Second thing that happens is you start to get stiff. That's called a rigor mortis. So if I die in a position, I'm not just going to flop back down like an unconscious person. I'm going to be stiff. You're going to have to kind of push me back down into place. Those of you who deal with dead bodies know this is true. The third thing is what really gives it away, and that is that when you have your heart is no longer pushing your blood, gravity starts to draw your blood. So if you die on your back and I get there, when I roll you over, your back will be discolored and swollen, because your blood is going to settle to your back. If I die in a cross position, your feet are going to turn purple and swell because there's no way to circulate that blood. Make sense? That is called liver mortis. This is the mortis triad. If you really want me to believe that they would have missed this, sure. Is it possible? Yes. Everything is possible. I'll always say yes. But I didn't find it reasonable. Is there another way to explain this? Well, maybe they're just lying about this. How many of you here love books and movies and TV shows about conspiracy theories, right? We're in a culture right now. Raise your hand, honestly. Christians love conspiracies. I'm sorry. Raise your hand. Come on. Get it. I want to see what you are. Okay, you're all the stupid people in the room, all right? Because conspiracies are stupid by nature. If you think, you know how hard it is to pull off a successful conspiracy? If you think you know of a successful conspiracy, it wasn't successful by definition. Successful conspiracies are never discovered. No one even thinks to look for them. They are successful. It turns out you need 5 things. And if you work in a homicide, you got more than one person involved, I will sometimes add a conspiracy charge. But I learned a long time ago, you need 5 things to pull off a conspiracy. How many kids are in this room who have siblings? If you're a kid in this room who has a sibling, raise your hand. Okay, you have a sibling. How many do you have? 1. He's not here today? She or he? Okay, how many has more than 1 sibling? Raise your hand. You got 2 or more, raise your hand. Okay, 3 or more, keep your hand up. 4 siblings, keep your hand up. This is good. 5 siblings, keep your hand up. Okay, well, I'll go with you right here. How many of you have four? Four siblings? Okay. Are those your parents? Sitting next to you? Oh, I'm going to teach you how to lie to them, okay? Ready? Okay, so here's how you're going to do it. You need these 5 things. If you want to lie to your parents, you need these 5 things. First thing you want is the lowest number of co-conspirators. It's easier for 2 of you to tell the lie and keep the secret than it is for all 4 of you. You don't need all 4. Just pick somebody. You just go with 2. Make sense? Also, you want to hold it for the shortest period of time possible. It's easier to tell a lie, keep a secret for a day than it is for a year. Does that make sense? This is not rocket surgery, okay? To mix a metaphor. This is just straight thinking. Free thinking ministry. So here we go. So the best thing for you to do is to pick one sibling, do the thing, lie to your parents, then kill your sibling immediately, okay? Because then it's over. Short time span. Can you think of a sibling you'd be willing to kill? No? Okay. Oh, you're pointing to each other. Good. Okay, good. Also, you're going to need excellent communication. So when your dad jams you up and he starts to question you, you're going to be able to have to tell your sibling, hey, this is what dad asked. That's why the first thing we do when we have more than one person involved in a crime is we separate them, right? You separate those people, and then you don't let them talk to each other. You need excellent communication. Fourth thing you need is you want somebody who you have a close relationship with. So you have 3 other siblings in your family. Okay, I have 6 other siblings in mine. Okay? If you have 6, 7 kids in a family, there are some siblings I'm close to, some siblings I don't like. Okay? This is the way it is. I'm not going to do a conspiracy with the ones I don't like. I'm going to pick a sibling I'm really close to. That's what you guys got to do. Does that make sense? Okay. Last thing, try to avoid any pressure. If dad and mom don't have any idea, don't even give them an inkling, because once they start questioning you, it's going to go downhill from there. You want no pressure. Now, why is this important? Because if you're going to tell me that the Christian conspiracy is just that, it's a conspiracy, it's a lie about the resurrection, well, okay, I know what makes a successful conspiracy work, and already I'm doubtful about this one. Why? Because there's too many people involved. It's not just Peter and James and John. It's not even just the 12. In Acts 1, we got 120 in the upper room. They picked Matthias as one of the witnesses to replace Judas, remember? 120 people. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, there were 500 people who saw the risen Christ on the same day. You want me to believe that's a conspiracy? Too many people. I'm already doubtful. Let's just play a game of Clue. You guys like Clue? This is old school Clue. This is the way we used to play it when I was a kid, okay? But I'll make the board a little different. I'll make the area around where Jesus did his ministry. We'll use as the game pieces the disciples. Make sense? Okay. Here's how we're going to play the game of Clue. Already, if you're asking me, too many disciples. Too many witnesses saying the same thing. Too many. 2, well, how long I got to hold this? Is it like 6 minutes or 6 hours or 6 days or 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years? No, it's 6 decades. You want me to believe that 500 plus people kept this together for 60 multi-generational conspiracy theories are as stupid as they come. Sorry, if you start to hear someone tell you, yeah, this started back in the 1600s, slap them now, okay? That's stupid. So you know how I feel about conspiracies. I think you can see it, can't you? Okay, let's go one more step. How do they communicate? Because if you got good communication, you can make this go. Okay, they're not in this holy huddle. Okay, they're all over the game board. That's the problem. How does Thomas keep this lie over here in India? Come on, clicker, I know you can do this for some reason. Over in India, top there. This is Matthew in North Africa. This is Paul over here in Rome. In the middle, you got Peter and Andrew, and you got James and John. Seriously? You can't like Snapchat each other. Well, how are you going to tell each other when I'm being tortured in India? How am I going to make sure I get that message out to everybody else? Here's the story we're staying with. That's the problem with this theory. Too many people holding it for too long with no way to communicate with each other, to know if anyone, but you don't think that they're torturing Thomas in India and saying, dude, Matthew already gave up the ghost and everyone else has already told the story. Look, our techniques for interrogation have not changed in thousands of years. They're doing the same stuff I do today. And if you can't communicate, you cannot get past that point. Also, we've said this, like, what is the level of pressure? You know, the Clue's got these little torture devices there, right? So this is great. You guys know what Jack Bauer is from the old 24? Does anybody even know that reference anymore? I'm not dating myself by even saying, but Jack Bauer was a guy who, if he needed to get the confession, he would like start snapping off your fingers to get it. That's what they were doing to these guys. Incredible pressure. And finally, are there some brothers in here? Yeah, there are. There's like Peter and Andrew. But this guy down here on the bottom, Matthew, nobody knows this guy. This guy comes, you guys watch The Chosen have you guys watched that Chosen? It's a great show. If you haven't started watching it, you should watch it. They take liberty with the Jesus story. They add backstory to all the different scenes, but it's really interesting how they creatively added the backstory. And the character development is incredibly compelling. So I would recommend it to you. But as you watch that, you realize that Matthew comes into this very late. He is not respected by anybody. Nobody even wants him to be part of this team. What is in it for Matthew? He's not connected to anyone else. Matthew is not part of that discipleship group from John the Baptist, right? All those guys were buddies. They're hanging out with John. John says, there's Jesus. He's the Lamb of God, takes away the sins of the world. They leave John. They go to Jesus. Not Matthew. He writes one of the earliest Gospels. What's in it for him? Now, this to me, is it possible? Yeah, I mean, it's just too easy to break. This is the worst form of conspiracy you could possibly have because it lacks all 5 things that are typically present for successful conspiracies. So I would say, is it possible? Yes, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is very unlikely to me. I crossed it off my list. I'll go one more step with you. Maybe they just had a vision. Maybe they just thought, hey, I don't want Jesus to be dead. And if you're by yourself and you think you see somebody who you did not want to die, I can see why you might imagine that person's still alive, even when, look, Mary is by herself in the tomb garden. She thinks she sees Jesus. Oh, that's the gardener. No, it's Jesus. No, Mary, it's the gardener. You just want it to be Jesus because you miss him and you're by yourself. And there's a couple of these, right? Like Peter, I'm sure, felt bad that he had denied Jesus, so he might have a vision in which he thinks he's seeing Jesus. He's by himself. James, the brother of Jesus, he didn't treat him all that well when he was alive. Maybe he felt bad about that. And he's got at least 1 or 2 sightings here where he's allegedly by himself. Can you see how if you want something bad enough, you can imagine it? But then we get to Saul of Tarsus. Okay, he sees him on the road. He's the only one who sees Jesus. Do you think that Saul wants Jesus to be alive? He's not like the others, right? I don't think he's got the same incentive. Then it gets even weirder. You got multiple accounts where more than one person sees the same thing. That'd be like me having a dream last night and you telling me every detail of my dream. That would freak me out, okay? Because we don't have group dreams. Those are called memories, okay? Group dreams don't happen. And you see this repeatedly in scriptures where more than one person sees the risen Christ. You have the 3 Marys. Again, you had the woman at the tomb, rather. And so you have a lot of these multiple accounts. It gets larger. So, for example, you have the 7 who are at the sea who see Jesus on the same day. They actually eat with him. I couldn't even get them all on the same screen here, so I got like 5 of them, okay? The other 2 are over there, just so you know. Okay? And then, you have the 10, no Judas, no Thomas. They're in the upper room, and they see Jesus. So I got 10 here. And then Thomas comes back into that fold. So now I have 11. And in some of these, I'm not even sure how many I have because it just says disciples. I don't know if it's just the apostles' disciples or is it the larger group of disciples. So for example, on the mountain, I'm not even sure how many we have here. The scholars kind of debate how many this could be. But at the very least, it's the 11. 11 seeing and reporting the same thing in different settings bothers me. And it's detailed. This is my favorite of all these scenes, though, it's at the, ascension of Jesus, right? And how large is this group? We don't know how large that group was. It's at least the 11, but I suspect it's a lot larger based on the text. By the way, forget about the resurrection for a second. If all Jesus did at the end was ascend into heaven in front of a bunch of eyewitnesses, would that not be enough for you? As a matter of fact, if you saw Jesus ascend into heaven today, don't you think you'd be a believer? You at least say something's up here. This dude's different. Wouldn't you? As a matter of fact, wouldn't you become a Christ follower if you saw something like that? Do you want to see it? If you saw that right now, wouldn't that make you a Christ follower? At some point, you're like, okay, I get it now. Because it can happen this morning. Do you want it to happen this morning? Okay, here we go. Okay. There should be no unbelievers in this room. Right? You saw the ascension of Jesus. That would be enough for me. Then we have this sighting where there's 500, Paul says, who saw the risen Christ on the same. This is going to be hard to number, but I'm going to give it a shot. There's a bunch of folks here who see this on the same day. How do we explain these kinds of, I couldn't get them all, so I'll add a few over here, a few over there. There you go. We're good to go. Now look, in any of these sightings, alleged sightings of Jesus, if you wanted to debunk it, because he's not really risen from the grave, all you have to do is go back to the grave. His body's still going to be there. You imagined all this other stuff. Oh, but the empty tomb. And you already know why I don't think the empty tomb is a lie. This is a conspiracy? Someone stole the body and lied? No. So this is why, by the way, Peter says, we're not making this stuff up, folks. This is just what we saw. With their own eyes, touched with their own hands, John says. So is it possible? Yes. Anything is possible. I'll always say yes to that. But I didn't think it was reasonable. Now we're going to skip through all these other ones because I don't have time with you. I want to get your questions. So get ready to start talking about your questions. But I want to go to the last one. The last one is your explanation as a Christian. You just think that the Gospels are accurately describing things that actually happened. Now, every explanation I learned a long time ago, even the true explanation has weaknesses. So I'm always trying to protect the jury from the weaknesses in my case, because I know that every case, even the true case, has strengths, but it also has some weaknesses. So don't think for a second that your explanation doesn't have any weaknesses. It does. It has the weakness that kept me out for years. Now, I'll say what the strengths are. The strengths are that it does best explain the 4 pieces of evidence I would have given you to start with. So yeah, this all makes sense if Christianity is just true, but I would have said, yeah, but here's the problem with your explanation. Your explanation requires a resurrection. I'm sorry, that's stupid. It requires something supernatural. I reject the supernatural. If you're going to start talking about an historical event and slip in a miracle, you're no longer in the same genre called history. You've now slipped over into a genre called mythology. There's no supernatural explanations in science, I would have said. And there are no supernatural explanations for history. Those things are out of bounds because I was a very committed philosophical naturalist. But wait a minute, isn't the entire investigation really about this question? Here's what we're trying to talk about this morning. We're investigating this question. Are supernatural events like a resurrection ever the most reasonable explanation? No, I reject the supernatural. No, stupid. That's the question we're investigating. So I get it. You might have some doubts. Shelve those. You got to shelve those doubts because this is the question we're investigating. You can't start off by saying the answer is no. It's like saying, is she dead or murdered? The answer is no. No, you have to at least be open to the investigation. Because I'll tell you what, if you aren't, I can show you something how early these accounts are in history. You will find a way to jump over that because you reject the supernatural. I can show you some other piece of evidence about document manuscripts or archaeology. You will find a way to jump over that because you're committed to the notion that there's nothing supernatural. I don't care what I show you at this point. Everything I show you, you will find a way to jump over it again and again and again and again because you are committed to that conclusion. And why are you committed to that conclusion? Because that is where you began and you don't want to move. That's not a reasonable way to conduct an investigation because you always up in the same place. There's a reason why I showed you this nightstand. If you think you know the answer before you begin, you won't even pull down the blankets. You think you already know. So I realized at some point, as I'm looking at this, that I only have a couple of choices here, right? So something happened to Jesus. What happened to Jesus? Well, either he rose from the grave or he didn't. Those are your 2 choices. He rose from the grave or he didn't. If you want me to end up over here on your side to believe he rose from the grave, to consider all explanations, including supernatural explanations, nay. Can't do that because I have an objection. I don't believe in the supernatural. That's going to prevent me from getting to that conclusion. It stands in my way. But as I looked at all the naturalistic explanations that people give and that I held for years, none of those work. They all have deal killers in them. This is why there are so many, folks. Atheists hold to all these different views. You know why? Because they know that no single view works. When the first one doesn't work, they invent another one. When that one doesn't work, they invent a new one. Now up to 6 right now, maybe 7. They will keep on inventing explanations because they know none of them work. I knew it too, but I was okay with that. I'd find a way to go under those, around those, jump over those, because I wanted to get to that conclusion that Jesus did not rise from the grave. Now take a look at these 2 paths for a second. Which one of these 2 paths is least encumbered? It's pretty clear, right? And as a matter of fact, this path over here to your left only has one roadblock in it, and I put that one there. Doesn't have to be there. I could easily pull down that bias. No, I like that there. Really? I thought to myself, wait a minute, so I'm somebody as an atheist back in those days, I always said I believe in what's called the standard cosmological model. That is a model of the universe that describes all space, time, and matter coming into existence at a point in the past. The universe is not eternally old, according to the physics of atheists who hold to the standard cosmological model, Big Bang cosmology. They believe that the universe had a beginning, that all space, time, and matter began at the beginning of the universe. I also accepted that. But wait a minute. So that means that all things that have a beginning require a cause. That means you're looking for a cause of the universe that cannot be spatial, temporal, or material, because those things were not available until the universe began. Are you with me so far? I'm looking for a first cause that is uncaused, that is non-spatial, non-material, non-temporal. You're already outside of naturalism, just to explain nature. So I'm thinking, if there's a thing out there, it's not an impersonal force outside of space, time, and matter, but it happens to be a personal being outside of space, time, and matter, why am I getting hung up over the rest? The biggest miracle in Scripture is not in the New Testament, folks. It's Genesis 1. Everything from nothing, all space, time, and matter from nothing. If there's something out there that can cause that, I'm guessing he can probably walk on water. That's a small potato miracle. The resurrection is a small potato miracle. If there's a being that can do that, he can certainly do this. And when I realized I had already been holding to a form of supernaturalism, extranaturalism, supra, whatever you want to call it, I dropped that guard. And then it was clear. It's wide open. It turned out that the entire thing that was keeping me from seeing the truth about the cross, the truth about Jesus, was me and the bias I held before I started. Now, for some of you, that's your story too. That it's not a matter of maybe you haven't investigated it this way. I am not a Christian because it works for me. It doesn't work for me. It stinks most of the time. Honestly, for your generation of kids you're raising, you think this is working for them? You think it's going to work for them in their social media platforms? No, you're going to get, basically, you're the nail that every hammer is looking for. If you ask my wife, we were together 18 years, and we both got saved. We've been together 23 since. Ask her which has been easier. First 18. So much easier. Look, it's so easy to throw the dart against the wall. Just go draw the bullseye around wherever the dart lands. That was my life for 18 years together with her. Now there's a bullseye already painted on the wall. I can never hit it. It's frustrating. I'm not a Christian because I was raised this way. I have no Christians in my family. I'm a Christian because, I'm stuck with it. It's true. And I'm glad. I'm glad to be stuck with it. Now look, I'm going to send you a bunch of stuff free. Here's what you're going to get. This is from our website, Cold Case Christianity. I'm going to send you, if you text me, if you are 50 or older, turn to the young person sitting next to you so you understand how to do this, okay? Because you're going to text me at a number, a single message, to the number 6. Yes, I know there's a lot of 6s in this number. I didn't get to pick it. Christians get hung up about that. But the point is, you're going to text me at 66866, a single word, detective. Just send that to me. I'm going to send you a link that'll give you all of this video, all 7 explanations, downloadable so you can watch all of them later on. You happen to be in this amazing place because I will tell you, I get to travel all over the country, and not every church has a pastor like Sean who is uniquely curious and interested in being able to make the case. You may not feel like you need it. But it turns out that we actually need it for the next generation, who has been convinced that everything else the worldview is teaching them, the culture is teaching them, is based on science. Your beliefs are based on preferences. But it turns out this is objectively true, whether I like it or not. And we need to be able to help our young people see that. It's much easier to stand in a truth you know is objectively true and not just a matter of personal opinion. So you're in the right place. If you don't have a home church, seriously, if you're visiting from some other home church, I get that. But if you don't have a home church, someone drug you in here for the first time, this is a good place to be able to study truth. Stay with us. If you don't think that what Sean has said is true about Tim Stratton's ministry, Free Thinking Ministries, in a place, there's a ton of these in California and Los Angeles County. There's like Stand to Reason is there, Reasons to Believe is there. There's a lot of us are out there in California. To have Tim in your neck of the woods is a resource that I hope you are using. He's got a website. You should be at Free Thinking Ministries researching the truth. You have the apologists living here with you. We're doing a fundraiser tonight, but don't worry about the fundraising part. Come. We're going to do more Q&A tonight. I'm going to show you some reasons why Christianity is uniquely evidential. Join us tonight. Now with that, Sean, let's take some questions. I know we probably went a little bit too long, but I want to make sure we get all the questions in we can.
I don't think any of us have a problem with the length that you're heading on, Jim. I would say we're pretty happy so far. How about you guys? You know, there was definitely a lot to unpack, right?
We teach this class at Biola. It takes 18 hours to teach it at Biola. So I gave you the 35-minute, 40-minute version of the 18-hour class.
Right?
Yeah,
So I think
crazy.
We're good, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's here. They got everything. We're all ready to go out and teach this to other people. Right?
Well, you probably have good questions.
Yeah.
And that's always the best part of what we do. So if you can hang with us a little longer than you're planning on hanging with us, do it so we can get these.
So just a reminder, just some things as we start the Q&A. 308-234-2311. The text number will be up on the screen as we go along. So ask your questions. Those who are watching on live stream, it's a couple minute delayed, so even me making the statement, you'll not see it for a couple minutes yet.
Yeah.
And so we will continue to try to get those questions as they come, the best we can. We'll cover as many as we can in the time. We'll still be in respective of people's time. So at this point, though, guys in the back that are in charge of everything, why don't you give us what we got? So how did you deal with atheist coworkers after coming to the faith?
Well, they teased me a lot, because I was pretty much a jerk before, and I was pretty profane. So they all knew me, and I didn't have any Christians. I was working on a surveillance team, which my son is now working on, and I remember they saw a difference in me, and so I was. We on a surveillance, you're actually one person is watching the bad guy if the bad guy's at home and he hasn't started to move yet. The rest of us are all on the perimeter waiting for the bad guy to move. And I was on a perimeter in a cemetery, in a funeral home parking lot. That's a bad neighborhood, but those are usually safe parking lots. So I'm sitting there and I'm reading my Bible. And I had a partner sneak up on my car and look over that and saw that I was reading the Bible. And he was like, I knew it. I knew there was something different, something was going on. He was just teasing me mercilessly. And that happened really until I retired. So I'm a chaplain now at my agency, so they all kind of got over it. But
what would you say the percentage of officers in your unit were Christians or even kind to Christians versus maybe more hostile?
Well, back then, I think I knew 2 Christians on the entire agency. Maybe it's different now. Right? I think my son is a pretty outspoken Christian there. If you go on our website, you'll see that he's doing videos from his surveillance unit because he's stuck on the surveillance, right? And he's bored. He's in this car 16 hours a day, so he's like sitting in this car. And so he's doing apologetics videos. He looks terrible. And people will get on YouTube and say, you look terrible. Why don't you cut your hair and stop doing videos out of your car? Well, he's on surveillance, so he's stuck in there,
They're wondering if he's homeless.
You think he looks homeless, yeah, for sure. But yeah, there's probably a little bit more now maybe than there were then. It's encouraging. I think if you're somebody who's going to go into law enforcement now, if you're not somebody who sees it initially as a calling from God, why would you go in it now? I don't know why anybody would make the sacrifice necessary to do that. And so he's got, when he has his first kid, if it's a boy, he's going to name that boy Jim. And he's going to think...
Have you told him this?
No, he's told me.
Okay.
And the question then becomes, well, does he try to encourage that kid to go into law enforcement? Do we want a fourth generation of Jim Wallaces on our department? Probably not. So if you don't see it, I think that's why you're going to see a higher percentage probably of Christians in law enforcement going forward, because who else would want to do this?
Yeah.
So,
do you feel like that, the teasing, was it people turning you off, just saying, oh, if he's a Christian, just ignore him?
Well, unless
or
a lot
were they
of
curious?
Well, a lot of, because I came into it evidentially. And if you ask me, well, what's your conversion experience? I'm not going to tell you. This is me. I don't think experiences are worth a lick. I have lots of Mormon family and friends. My dad's second wife, his second wife's Mormon. And I will tell you that those folks are all going to tell you about their experience, their conversion experience, how their life was changed by their Mormonism. You don't think that's true? So why would you take the same approach? So I came in by examining the evidence. So if you were going to talk to me about Jesus as a detective, you're going to get my view, and that's going to be a little more, I think, persuasive for the detective anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Because he knows the same skill. I'm using the same skill set that you are. Look, all of you in the room, the first thing we have to aim at as Christ followers is really excellence. Whatever you're doing, be excellent at it. And if you're excellent at it, you will earn the opportunity to talk about Jesus in a way that is credible, because they realize, well, this is the guy we use for all this stuff. This is the guy this is our go-to guy, our go-to gal, what we do. You have a better chance of being influential. Remember, it's always relationships and truth claims together that make the change. You have a relationship with somebody. The question is, can you make the case? Because if you have just one of those things, I can share my testimony. Well, everyone can share their testimony. Everyone has a testimony. Even the people who believe things you don't believe. Buddhists have testimonies. So the question is, can you share the case in the context of a relationship?
Yeah. I actually, this makes me think of a story. I was on spring break when I was in college, and I visited a friend in Boston, and I was walking around the city because he wasn't on spring break. And I was walking around the city, and I met this guy from Europe. He was a Dutch guy, about my same age. He was traveling, because I don't know what Europeans do most of the time. And
go to America.
They just go around wherever they want. And we started talking about his faith, his background, we were just sharing who are you? And these things came up. And he had a testimony about his Buddhist connection, weird meditation life. But I'm seeing exactly what you were saying is when we were talking through, I shared my testimony. That wasn't what he was really interested in. I mean, he was a nice guy. But once we started talking about, well, tell me why you believe that. And he had absolutely no reasons other than he was struggling with life, right?
Yeah.
Life was too much for him. He was anxiety. He didn't know where to go. And so he turned towards what he heard friends do. But when I started talking about Christianity and the faith with truth claims, his ears were wide open. We actually ended up messaging back and forth, and I can just verify exactly what you're saying, that everyone has a testimony, but not everybody has real reasons behind it.
Yeah, we are uniquely situated as Christians. Remember that all kinds of other theistic worldviews are not grounded in a historical event. Amen. So if you're just talking about the teaching of Buddha, how can I test that? It's not grounded in history. I can test. Yeah. The great thing about Christianity is it's hinging on historical events in the first century, if those didn't occur. And we have a tendency to be able to test historical claims. And that's what we can do with Christians. It's different, for sure.
All right, let's go to the next question. What we got next? What was the number one reason you became a Christian? Out of all of those, what was the, maybe if I can, I'm going to have to be the interpreter of some of these questions. What was the final piece?
Everyone always asks that, okay? There's no final piece. Here's why.
There's got to be a final piece.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of it is that I build cumulative cases. They're cumulative circumstantial cases. Now, I'm not going to get into all that with you, but there's two forms of evidence, direct and indirect. Indirect is also called circumstantial. Direct evidence is just eyewitness testimony. Everything else is indirect circumstantial evidence. Fingerprints, indirect evidence. DNA, indirect evidence. If it's not an eyewitness claim, it's indirect evidence. So I typically build in front of juries cumulative indirect cases. If there was a witness, it would have got solved years ago. I'm only working the lame cases without witnesses, okay? So I build these large cumulative cases on hundreds of pieces of evidence that point to the same inference. They're powerful that way. That's what I did with Christianity. So I was probably 6 or 8 months in before I said, okay, this is strong, And it was no one single thing. Now, I didn't do that for you today. That's a different talk I do. But I just tested the eyewitness reliability of the gospel authors and built a cumulative case for why I thought what they were saying is accurate. That was a whole different process. We just did one chapter of Cold Case Christianity today. That's a 15-chapter book. So it was that cumulative case that was compelling for me. But there's no silver bullet. And folks, for the most part, you'll discover this if you do anything online. There is no silver bullet for your non-believing friends either. This is a process. So if you asked me, can you tell me this? Because you're looking for a quick 5-minute response. I can't tell you why I'm a Christian in 5 minutes. It's going to take me a couple of hours. That's why it's relationships in the context of truth claims that give you the time. Relationship buys you the time you need. So my kids have watched me, and even when they've had seasons where they've kind of drifted, they're now like 32, 30, 25, and 23. So in those seasons where they drifted, they always knew that, I knew it was true because they've been listening to me talk about it for 25 years in this way. So eventually they all came back because it's like rubber band theology, right? It's going to hurt when you let go of the rubber band, so don't go too far. It hurts more. Try to stay close. And they all did that because they had a sense that, yes, I could run for a season, but because I knew it was true, I had to come back to it.
Yeah. That's a really good point when you think about even what some of the social media wars are, the Facebook, people trying to win each other over on Facebook there's no silver bullet, right? And so that helps our expectation level, right? Because if you go into a relationship where you have an opportunity to speak, you understand it's never about the one moment. So the pressure is not there either, right?
Right.
I don't have to have the case closed immediately, right? Everything in this one thing. So there's relax and breathe.
A better approach for you guys to take would simply be, well, tell me what it is that's keeping you out. They're going to give you one thing that's keeping them out. Then you can share with them, well, here's how I dealt with that. I thought the same thing as you, and here's how I dealt with that. I guarantee you, as soon as you're done with that, they're going to give you the second thing that's keeping them out. So this is a longer conversation you have over time. But by the way, you have to be ready to have these conversations. But you know what? We think we send our kids to college, and that's where they walk away from the faith because we pull them in their junior year of college, and they're no longer Christians. But if you ask the juniors who are no longer Christians, when did you decide it wasn't true? They'll say statistically over and over again, between the ages of 10 and 17. Before they ever went to college, they already didn't think it was true. They just didn't tell you. And then when they got there, they were free to express their view. So they're leaving while they're with us. This is why we had to do this in junior high, upper elementary. Because by the time they get a smartphone, they're encountering the same kind of skepticism that we used to encounter in college. They're encountering it much earlier. And people are willing to do for a lie what most of us are not willing to do for the truth. So
That's good. All right.
Okay, so we have 24 questions so
we just
far.
Flashed. Now we're going to move a little bit quicker.
Speed round now. The speed round of questions.
What daily practices do you do to deepen your faith?
Okay, so I'm constantly in Scripture, reading Scripture. We're in the book of Acts right now. I'm not legalistic about it, but my wife and I will find some point each day. We don't go through whole chapters. We simply go through the breaks. So if you're in the book of Acts and
paragraph breaks.
Yeah, whatever the title breaks are, like in the NASB or the ESV, we will simply take that chunk.
Yeah.
Because it's doable. We also do it while we have, I have a spectrum of commentaries from people that Tim and I either like or hate, so I get the entire spectrum.
Yeah.
And I use all of that, right, to learn what different views are on each passage. And so it takes about maybe 30 minutes is all. Sometimes it's at breakfast, but remember, we don't have any kids now, so it's easier for us to do that. They're all gone. So we have that time. That's part of it. And I'm constantly writing. It's a book number 8 comes out in September. And as you're researching, you're digging deeper into those things. So a combination of study for that purpose and just the daily stuff I do with Susie. Also, what are your podcasts? What are you listening to? On my podcast list, it used to be 80-20 sports. 80-20 sports. So I flipped that. Whenever I'm in the hotel room like last night, as soon as I get in the hotel room, I turn on, you're going to think I'm crazy, J. Vernon McGee. Do you guys know who that is?
Oh, these people will not think you're crazy, right? We got some J. Vernon McGee lovers in this place.
I think I've gone through J. And the podcast just runs. I leave it on all night.
Yeah.
Even while I'm sleeping, I leave it on all night. So if I wake up and I can't sleep, I'm listening to wherever he happens to be.
Yeah.
And his, may I say? Anyway.
That's good. No, that's really good. It's really good. What next?
Quick.
What's the most difficult question you've ever faced about Christianity?
Well, it used to be the problem of evil, and some variation of the problem of evil would be most common questions you would get. But the culture is changing on us, folks. There's a cancel culture out there. For years, we used to defend the idea that America was founded on Christian principles, and the atheists would say, no, it's not. And we would say, yes, it is. They are not Christians inside. Well, most of them were pastors of some kind of Christian denomination. I don't care if you don't think Jefferson or Ben Franklin was the rest of them all were. And we would make a case for connecting our Christian beliefs to the founding fathers. How's that working for you today? They're tearing down the founding fathers' statues, folks. And those racist slave owners that founded the country, now they're saying, yeah, you guys are right. They're all Christians. They agree with us now, because they want to cancel us the same way they canceled them. And this is coming. If you don't see it, you're not paying attention online. So a lot of the bigger questions we're getting now are about the evils taught in the Bible. How does God approve slavery? Well, there seem to be a lot of rules in Exodus and Leviticus that affirm slavery. We can talk about that later. But the point is, there really is defending the culturally inappropriate. It used to be, I don't like Christians, but I like Christ. I like Jesus, but not you Christians. Really? Now they don't like Jesus because what he teaches about sexual identity, about sanctity of life, about traditional marriage, about all these things that the culture has rejected, they can now trace those back to the teaching of Jesus. You're either going to see a new progressive form of Christianity emerge, which we're already seeing, but for sure, you conservative, Bible-believing Christians are on the chopping block. So that's probably where the future of, you need to be able to make that case when people throw that out at you.
You just promoted our next sermon series after we're finishing the book of
Good.
Acts here. You promoted, we're doing the goodness of God and talking about Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. And
yes, good.
So,
it's a timely,
so you guys,
this
just
is
here in a
why
few
I said
weeks.
to you, this is a good place to be. So,
we planned all of this.
Of course.
One of my adult children has left the faith they grew up in. How should I try to reach them now?
Okay, don't panic. Relax. Breathe. Relax. If you knew me at 34, you'd say, that dude will never be a Christian. No way. But here I am. And so I think I've given my kids space. If they're at 23, they're not like where I want them to be. Well, they're still 12 years ahead of me, right? So God does what God does. And what's going to make the difference now and between now 23 and they're 35 is, will I love them like crazy and represent Christ to them? So you have to be praying for those kids and modeling Jesus for those kids, and exhale, relax. God's got this. As bad as it may seem, God's got this. So continue to be, by the way, be able to make your case. But don't try to wedge the case in every time you guys are together. I don't do that. It's not like they don't know what I taught them for years. Nothing's changed. They know what the truth is. I got to give them room to make the mistakes so they'll return to it without constantly like beating them with a stick about it, right? So for me, a lot of it's just patience.
That's good. That's good. Okay, this is a longer one. Are there good books and explanations of how the earth was populated in interfamily marriage and having children? I think I understand that first. In light of today's taboos and fears, concerns about genetic deformities and abnormalities, I would think this would be a vulnerability of biblical consistency.
Yep. Okay, so I think there's lots of good stuff on this. Some of the best work being done on Adam and Eve, I think, are still being done by Reasons to Believe. Fuz Rana is a molecular biologist who's written a book called Who is Adam? Second printing came out, I think, last year or year before last. It's a really good book that talks about Adamic hominids and how they fit into the genealogy, how they fit into... Remember, whatever you're seeing in terms of genetic mutations today was not necessarily true for the earliest humans. A lot of why we have the problems we have today is because we're so far along in the mutation sequence. So, if you think, well, if interfamily kind of relationships produces certain kinds of deformities today, does not mean it would have at the beginning of the line. So a lot of that stuff can be resolved, and the best source for that is Reasons to Believe. I think it's just rtb.org.
Would you say the name of that book again?
And the book is Who is Adam? It's a great resource.
Okay.
But there's lots of people who are writing about this right now. Just Google Who is Adam, and you'll see all the other books that also are similar from other people. There's a guy up in Canada, I can't remember his name right now, who just did work on this too, really good work. So,
Good. How do you account for the fact that some well-known Christians knew all these arguments for the resurrection, but still lived a life full of unrepentant sin? They didn't let this transform their lives. So maybe Judas would be, that would be pre-resurrection.
What a surprise, right? Because Jesus never said that some of you are going to say you healed and did things in my name, but I'm going to say I never knew you. Like, Jesus never said that, right? So apparently, this has been going on for a long time. And this is also true of anyone who holds any worldview. I've not really known people who are 100% consistent with whatever worldview they have, let alone Christians. But I always say it, there's only 3 reasons why anyone commits a murder. Only 3. They're the same 3 reasons why anyone commits any crime, the same 3 reasons why you have ever sinned. There's only 3 reasons. I discovered these working homicides, so it makes it really easy to work the homicide. It is financial gain, sexual lust. The third one is the catch-all for everything else, the pursuit of power. I think it's in 2 John where it talks about the pride of...
1 John 2.
1 John 2.
Yep.
1 John 2. I always get the 2 in there. It's 1 John 2.
Yeah.
So that I didn't know that passage, though, when I started. But it turns out those are always the 3 things. So if you wanted to protect yourself from doing stupid, people don't realize that those are our drives. These are things that God has created for good, but we have perverted for ugly. So I'm not opposed to power, righteous power. God is the righteous power. But you can have evil power if we just perverted it. Yeah. When somebody comes into a Walmart and shoots 60 people who are a different skin color, what is that about? That's pride. That's power. That's a subset. I'm more important than you. My race is more important than yours. We're perverting the 3rd category. When someone gets disrespected in a gang and shoots another gang member, what's that about? Respect, authority. It's in the pride category. It's in power. These are pursuit of power. So what that means is the people we've seen fall just this year, because we've seen a couple of big ones, well, how'd they fall? Sex, money, power. It's always the same 3. No surprises. And once I see that you're involved in one of those, I'm suspecting the other 2, because they have a tendency to be the unholy trinity. So if I'm an old guy who's in a public ministry and I am sexually inappropriate, I probably used my power and money to get that to happen. Yeah. See, it's a trilogy. It's the Trinity, rather, unholy trinity of motive.
But the inconsistency of the actions with the faith doesn't prove the evidence for disprove
the
evidence
because
for the faith.
If that's the case, then everyone's worldview is false because everyone is inconsistent with their. We always step outside our worldview when we chase one of those 3 things, and we're all that fallen guy. I learned a long time working in cold cases that these guys will do one murder. Are they killers? Well, they only killed one person. That was 30 years ago. They have not killed. They're deacons at your church. They're working at your hospitals. They are firemen. I had a fire captain. 35 years afterwards, he was living a great life. You never would have suspected him. Is it really fair? He only killed one person. Well, okay, you still are. You did kill your wife. So, but should I leave him alone? It turns out you can do that one thing in the past and live a brilliant life afterwards, never even do anything close to that again. That's described perfectly in Genesis. That is the enigma, the fallen nature of humans. In the image of God, capable of great beauty, but deeply rebellious. And that's the struggle. We are so deeply rebellious that we will often, if we're pursuing one of those 3 things, we'll fall.
Good. Next. How would you debunk other religions?
Well, okay, every view has to be logically consistent. So I'm looking for logical consistencies. It's very hard to debunk something that's not grounded evidentially. That's why as an atheist, I was only interested in the historically grounded evidential belief systems. That would be Christianity is one, rooted in a timeline, but Mormonism is one. 1,000-year history recorded in the Book of Mormon from 600 BC to 400 AD on the North American continent. You could test that. Islam is one. Ahmadiyya Islam is another. Baha'i, not so much. I mean, it gets trickier. So there are some you could not debunk because how would you debunk them? If I look at the proverbial statements of Buddha or Confucius, they're quite beautiful, and I'm sure you could say they're helpful. Yeah. But I'm not interested in proverbial statements. I'm interested in, by the way, do I need to debunk? Imagine this. I'm in trial. I get this guy, and I've given you 100 pieces of evidence that demonstrate he's the killer. But he is a white male who's 5'10", with blonde hair. Can the defense attorney get up and say, okay, fine, he's given you good reasons that my defendant My client is guilty of this, but has he gone out and proved that every other white male who's 5'10" with blonde hair is not the killer? I'm not obligated to do that. If the evidence is good that he's the killer, I don't need to debunk all the other people who look like him, right? That's stupid. Yeah. So once you have good reason to believe that this is true, I don't know why you think you have to debunk everyone else's. But if you've got somebody who holds a false view, I would start by not showing, let me show you what's wrong with you. I would start by saying, let me show you why this is so powerful on this side, why this is evident. Because what will happen is as you start to do that, they'll realize, yeah, I can't do that over here. Like I can't test this over here the way that you can test that. And that'll show the strength of your view.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's do one more, and then we're going to save the rest of them because we got another Q&A coming tonight. So this is one of those, you got to come back at 6 o'clock.
I've got a much shorter presentation tonight. We're going to get right to Q&A.
Okay. So if atheists have all the roadblocks, why do they not take the easier side with less roadblocks?
Well, I think you already know. Right? Okay. There are 3 reasons why anyone rejects a truth claim. Only 3. Ready? I say this is why you shun the truth. The first one is rational. Like you just think there's not enough evidence for this. Okay, that's a rational objection. Let me show you some evidence. The second one, though, is a much larger group. Emotional. Well, my dad was a Christian. He was a jerk. I don't want anything to do with Christianity. Okay, that has nothing to do with the evidence for Christianity. That has to do with your emotional response to Christians. I get it. The third one is also powerful. Volitional. I don't want it to be true. I'd have to change the way I'm living. I'm living with this relationship I shouldn't probably be engaged in. I've got this, that, whatever it is in those 3 areas we talked about, right? It turns out that the number of people who really hold truly detached, rational objections, they're only out because of rational objections, is pretty small. Most all of us are out, like my dad, for volitional reasons. So we always talk, Frank Turk and I, and Frank was in your town last year with Tim. We're all good friends, and Frank and I would always ask this question. Okay, if I could demonstrate for you evidentially Christianity was true, would you become a Christ follower? And they'll say, well, you can't do that. It's not true. No, it's a thought experiment. Imagine there was this way I could demonstrate to your satisfaction that Christianity was evidentially true. Would you become a Christ follower? You'd be shocked to know how many people would say no. Okay, well, then it's not an evidence issue for you. It's not a head issue. It's a heart issue for you. It's that you don't want it to be true for one reason or another. It's not, I don't want to malign all non-believers, but that's a big part of what we're dealing with here. So this is why when someone comes up and wants you to solve the problem at the end of a presentation, I don't have the relationship side. I have the truth claim side. I know how to defend this, but I don't know you. This is why our world, we all have websites where thousands of people are reading our materials, but to be honest, the people I'm having deep influence with are people who I know well enough to know what is the real reason for your objection. So you're doing better work than we are. We're just trying to equip you to do the work of ministry. Because it turns out we don't know the people, like this question comes up, the atheists in your life, but you do. But I guarantee you, it wasn't a rational reason that was holding me up, as much as it was other issues. This means a life. Are you ready to surrender your life? Because that's what this is.
To kneel. Yeah.
We have a tendency to go, I just assent intellectually to this world. No. This is complete surrender. And the only people who are backing out, like you asked that other question, why do people do these stupid things when they say they're Christians, are people who have not done the one thing that God's asking us to do, which is to completely surrender. Do Christians divorce at the same rate as everyone else? Yes, unless you're surveying the Christians who attend church, read their Bibles, and actually are surrendered to the Christian worldview, and their rate of divorce is significantly less. So are we Christ followers in name only? Or are we committed? There are people I know in this room right now who are more committed to your favorite sports team. You listen to more data related to your sport team. You think about your sport team more. You know how your sport team is structured. We're talking about March Madness. Some of you actually are got brackets that are like, you think you, by the way, no one's bracket. Who wins a March Madness? It's a little secret. Nobody wins those brackets, okay? You better figure out a way to help somebody win, because nobody ever wins those. But my point is, there are people who know more about that. They're sold out to that more than they're sold out to this. So this is the kind of worldview this is. This is not asking for you to say, yep, okay, I think it's true. It's asking for you to surrender your life to this truth. And that's when it makes a difference. And when people have surrendered their life to this truth, they're not doing the stupid things you see people doing today.